Welcome to The Author Show, where we feature new authors and books, from fiction to self-help and everything in between. You'll find it all at theauthorshow.com. That's theauthorshow.com. And now let the show begin.
Hello and welcome back to the show. This is your host, Don McCauley. Today we're welcoming the program author T.M. Morris, and she is the author of Mama's Curse. Tia, how are you?
I'm doing great.
Well, tell us a little bit about yourself, please.
I am a mother of two, been married for 34 years. I'm a retired LAPD captain and a new author.
So tell us about your book.
My book, Mama's Curse, is a memoir, and it's a story about my struggles throughout the years and how I overcame those struggles. The daughter of an immigrant father, I was raised by a single teenage mother. And my book actually chronicles my life growing up and even as an adult in dealing with relatives and tackling parenting issues, as well as my plight as an African-American woman on a male-dominated police department, the Los Angeles Police Department. So it's a real story from a regular person's perspective. I'm not a celebrity. So it's an ordinary woman's extraordinary story, I like to think of it. It's a story which inspires people, I hope will inspire people to live on purpose and unapologetically. And it also delves into generational curses that we all encounter throughout our lives.
Now, who did you write your book for specifically?
Well, it's funny, I didn't really write it for anyone in particular. I needed to clear this fog out of my head. And so I wrote the book. I was inspired to write the book while going through treatment for breast cancer. And so in that vein, I thought that the book would probably resonate more with women. However, I'm getting a lot of good feedback from men as well. But I really wanted to write the book, especially for those people who have been faced with adversity in life, so that they might be able to see a different perspective while working through their issues, just as I saw when working through mine.
Could you say there's any type of central message or perhaps underlying theme that you could say runs throughout the book?
Most people would think that it's breast cancer. However, the message that I believe is more central is that you should never, ever give up, no matter what the issue, and that persistence really is the key to success, which it has been for me. And where there's a will, there's a way. So those are the central messages, so to speak, not just one message.
So if you had to choose, what would you say is the single most important idea you're sharing in your book that's really going to add value to the reader's life?
The single most message that is going to add value to the reader's life, I think it's going to be perseverance, is that you have to continue on no matter what you're faced with. And so I just think that the message is that of unconditional love, and I just hope that message is clear when you're reading the book.
Now, if you could compare your book with any book out there we might already be familiar with, which book would it be and why?
Well, as far as memoirs go, I would compare my book most with Cookie Johnson's book, Believing in Magic, because in her book she talks about her personal struggles growing up, her relationship struggles, and most prominently her trials and tribulations with her family when they were faced with her husband's diagnosis with HIV. And Mama's Curse similarly talks about overcoming my lifetime of adversities, which include my family history of breast cancer, as well as my own personal struggles with the disease, and my childhood growing up in an abusive home.
How did you come up with the title for the book?
The title of the book is a little bit tricky in that I originally thought about Mama's Curse as being because of the breast cancer aspect of the book. But because it's not all about breast cancer, I had to consider all the other aspects of my life that played into Mama's Curse. And that's where the generational curses came into play. And so when I reflected back on my life, I thought about the history of domestic violence and alcohol abuse and drug abuse that affected my brothers, the teenage pregnancy that affected my mom. So when I thought about those curses is where I came up with a broader scope of the title. And that's how I came up with the title of Mama's Curse and made it more meaningful in general and not just about the breast cancer aspect.
Now, you spent 33 years with the LAPD. Is there a nexus between your breast cancer and your long-standing career in law enforcement?
Absolutely. There's a huge nexus in that with police and fire officials, there are some illnesses that are considered to be work-related when law enforcement officers are affected, and cancer is one of those illnesses. And because no one knows the origin of any cancer, and due to the nature of the job that I did for 33 years, having faced the known and unknown carcinogens and come in contact with bloodborne and airborne pathogens, it made it probable that I was affected at work. So when I was diagnosed with breast cancer, I sued the city of Los Angeles, and I won my case, which made my cancer a work comp-related injury, and that made the city liable for all of my medical care.
Now, you talk about generational curses in the book. What are those generational curses, and how do they play a part in this book?
Well, those generational curses, as I somewhat touched on already, as far as the drug abuse and alcohol abuse, which affected my brothers. One is an alcoholic, one is a drug addict. And the domestic violence that we saw growing up, it also affected my brother in that sense as well. And so I talk about those curses that are passed down from generations, as well as in my profession with this sexism and racism, which is also a generational curse that was passed down that affected me on the job. And so those generational curses that I talk about in the book, and I really expound on them in the book.
So as a law enforcement official, what types of challenges did you face with having family members involved in criminal activity?
Ooh, that was a big one. Being that both of my brothers were involved in criminal activity and in and out of the prison system for many of the years that I was on the police department, it was a real challenge for me in the sense that my job did not allow us to associate with convicted felons, which both of them were. And so it was hard for me to turn my back on them in their times of need, and that wreaked havoc with my personal values due to my strong sense of family. But when I saw that they were not respectful of my lifestyle as a law enforcement officer, I eventually had to draw a line in the sand. And I had to let go of the relationships with them so that I could minimize the threat to my family, the threat to my job, so that they wouldn't interfere with my livelihood.
This is a book about survival. What was the main ingredient in managing your career, your illness, your family, and a household which contributed to that survivorship?
Well, there's not one main ingredient, but I'd like to think about two which contributed to my survivorship. And one was my faith, and the other was my husband. Because without my belief in God and my husband's undying support, I don't know where I would be right now. My husband was also on the LAPD for 32 years along with me, so he knew firsthand what issues I faced on the job, and he helped me work through many of those issues, in addition to being my biggest cheerleader as I rose through the ranks. Like I mentioned before, I retired as a captain with 33 years on the job, and following my battle with breast cancer, he also nursed me back to health, and most importantly, we worked together in managing our children and our household. And so I think those are the two main ingredients and not just one.
What advice would you give young women regarding female breast health?
The whole breast cancer part of this book is something that is really near and dear to my heart. So I do go out and I talk. And whenever I get a chance or an opportunity to talk to anyone, I emphasize that early detection is key to survivorship and that cancer is not discriminatory. I know of several people who have been diagnosed in their early 30s and their late 20s, and then I had treatment at City of Hope, and I saw where there were children that were walking around with masks on and that were affected by cancer. And so I let them know that cancer can strike at any age and affect all ethnicities. So I tell them, don't ever think it can't happen to you, even at an early age and even if you have no family history.
Now, is this book a passion piece, or are you planning on writing more books?
This piece is definitely a passion piece, but I do have some other books in the works, and first and foremost, I have one that I'm working on right now. It's a series. It's a homicide detective series that features a female homicide detective named Gertrude Bellamy, and it's based on or inspired by real LAPD stories, many of which I was involved with, and I'm going to follow that up with a children's series called Little Gertie, and it talks about a lot of issues in society, body shaming and bullying and things of that nature, which it will cover a lot of those topics. And lastly, my husband and I are co-writing a book based on our 34-year marriage, and it's been prompted by a lot of friends and people that we know, they want to know what the success is to maintaining a long marriage. And that one is going to be called He Said, She Said, We Said. And so those are the things that I have in the hopper right now.
What's been your most rewarding experience since publishing this book?
Ooh, it's been wonderful, but my most rewarding experience has been the speaking engagements that I've garnered to share my story, as well as the connections that I've made with organizations such as Susan G. Komen Foundation and other lesser-known women's organizations and themed book clubs. I get excited when I get asked to go and speak, because I think when we tell our story, it empowers other people to tell their story, and it helps us make it. It helps us survive and survive longer.
How would you describe your writing style?
My writing style, I believe, is conversational. It's conversational in the sense that I'm chatty, I like to talk, and I want it to come across as you're having a conversation, or the reader having a conversation with my book, or with me as they're reading my book. I want the words to jump off the page, and where people actually feel like they're in the room with me and that they're talking to me. And actually, that's some of the feedback that I've gotten on Amazon, is that they feel like they're in the room with me and that they're talking to me.
So based on your experience as a writer, what's the one recommendation you would make to authors just starting out?
Well, definitely do it because it's based on purpose. You want to write based on purpose. You don't want to write for financial gain. You don't want to write for notoriety. You want to write because you have something to say, and you have something that you think will benefit someone. And so that's the biggest or the best advice that I would give anyone who is considering writing.
In your opinion, who should buy your book?
I believe that women from 18 to 80 years old, college professors in women's studies, African American studies, Latino American studies, sociology, psychology, and criminal justice, all of those folks who want to explore overall survivorship, leadership, and self-sacrifice, as well as mental health professionals who should buy this book maybe to explore aspects of life and how they affect one's health. Because there's no doubt in my mind that in addition to my job and the stresses and the things that I described earlier about the pathogens and things like that, there's no doubt in my mind that the way I lived, how I grew up, affected my health, as well as my mom's health. And that's where the family history comes in, is that when you share the same environment and you share the same food and things like that, then certain things are going to be passed on from generation to generation. And so I really believe that primarily women, like I said, but professors, men and women, will also benefit and should buy this book.
Do you have a website?
I do have a website, and my website is www.vintagecityent.com. That's VINTAGECITYENT.com. And my Facebook page is at Mama's Curse.
Well, this has been just great. Our guest today has been T.M. Morris, and she is the author of Mama's Curse. Tia, thanks very much for being with us today.
Thank you.
This is Don McCauley wrapping up another edition of The Author Show. Please share this interview with your family and friends so that they too may have the opportunity to discover our guest and her work. And why not spread the word on social media? We look forward to you joining us next time for another great book and another great author on The Author Show.
Thanks for listening to The Author Show. Find out more about authors and their work at theauthorshow.com. Theauthorshow.com. Tune in next time to another great author on The Author Show.